Today we are talking about A Wounded Fawn, which is a new horror film streaming on Shudder. Welcome to Boys on Film. I'm your host, Phil Marriott. Joining me is Paul Joseph. If you love movies like we do, make sure you subscribe and like the video at the end of it if you have liked it. Paul, A Wounded Fawn, directed by Travis Stevens, who did a film called Jacob's Wife and also Girl on the Third Floor, which I kept seeing on Netflix. I'm pretty sure it was Netflix, not Shudder, but didn't actually watch all of it. I started to watch it a few months ago, but didn't see it all, so I can't comment on his previous works. But this is inspired by, well, surrealist art and Greek mythology. Interesting premise, isn't it?
Yeah, really interesting premise. It has a kind of stalker, serial killer element, but then weaves in these kind of vengeful Greek mythical characters from myth and art and various different things. There's a gentleman who is very quickly shown to be definitely a killer or a serial killer, and he has a new victim who he's taken away for the weekend, and things don't go to plan, and it seems like he's perhaps being visited by these vengeful furies, who are these like vengeful figures from Greek myth who take the form of his previous victims. But is it all in his mind, or is it actually happening?
So we've got Josh Ruben, who's the baddie, but we've also got Sarah Lind, who was in Jacob's Wife, which was the previous film that this director made. I actually really liked her. I thought she reminded me of the woman from Dead to Me and Bloodline. Did you ever watch the TV series Bloodline?
Linda Cardinelli, I think. Or...
Oh, that's it, yeah. I thought she really looked like her. And she had the kind of same sassiness.
She played Velma in the Scooby-Doo that had Buffy in it. Interesting fact about an actress who's not in the film, who just looks like an actress who was in the film, but yeah.
But yeah, she's a curator at the museum, and she goes on a date with this guy, the baddie, and he takes her to a secluded cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere. So straight away we've got the horror tropes, which seems quite familiar. But actually what the director does, or the writer does with it, he kind of plays around with the genre and doesn't make it that predictable. So all along you're kind of like wondering what the real threat is, because obviously there are other threats along with him.
You know, it has sort of like elements of stuff that's either visions or myths or things that are there. Like he sees a sort of like animal god type character who seems to be influencing him, but it's all very, very like bright, sort of like rich colours and kind of smoke coming from behind. The style of that and the artiness reminded me of the remake of Suspiria.
Yes, I was thinking the same, but also Dario Argento's work before that as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of very bright reds, kind of, it felt very 70s.
Yeah, and the sort of film stock they use and the way it looks makes it has that certain look to it, which I think works really well for it.
I was going to ask you about that, because did you notice that the film had scratches, almost like it was a film from the 60s or 70s, where you have like an old film that's worn and you can see like the white flicks coming up on the screen? Did you notice those?
I didn't notice that as a general thing. I noticed there's a few scenes where things were happening and it was almost like the background and stuff, because it gets almost quite hallucinogenic, doesn't it, as well? So
yeah, because it's separated into two acts. So you've got Act 1, which is in the cabin, and then Act 2, which is like really hallucin... I can't even say it. Hallucinatory, hallucinogenic stuff going on, and it's very trippy, and it does feel like a different film in a way. But I was wondering why they did that with the film, because it wasn't set in the 70s, because there's a scene where she's on the loo and she's texting her friend. She's obviously starting to get these warning signs that he's not going to look after her, basically. But she's obviously got a modern mobile phone. So I couldn't understand what the point of that was, because I thought this is really good because it feels really authentic. Although it did bug me a bit that you could see the scratches on the screen quite a lot.
Yeah, maybe it was just aiming for that more sort of like... Because there was all those sort of 70s sort of arty horror films that were a bit more cerebral and maybe a bit more serious than some of the slasher type ones. So maybe it was that, really. And
the colours as well. There's a lot of oranges and browns.
Yeah.
But I thought it started really well. I quite liked Act 1, and then Act 2, obviously it just did go a bit nuts. It kind of reminded me of similar films where they do go nuts in the second half, and I'm thinking
Malignant.
Yeah, it reminded me, not Star-wise, but it reminded me of that in the sense that it does go completely bonkers at the end.
Well, there is a moment where that does involve something coming out of the back of her head, doesn't there? So it becomes quite grotesque. This mixture of bloody arty and then nature and earthy, and of course it all has all this like Greek myth, and it has these characters who are pursuing him who have that bit of like, are they dressed up in some sort of pagan Wicker Man costume, or are they, what are they? They're sort of interpretations of his previous victims. On that side, it looks quite low rent, almost as if it's like it's within his own imagination, but he's not got a very broad imagination. It could work in different ways, as whether he is actually experiencing this and he is being visited by these people who have come to torment him for his deeds, or if it's him just hallucinating, which kind of culminates in a very protracted and quite disturbing final frame as the credits roll.
It's like had that lingering shot, that final shot as the credits were going over the top.
I mean, there's two actors in it, but one doesn't have to do much, but the other one does, and it's like, wow, that's like a lot. That actor's work getting their money's worth for that, which probably on a film like this wasn't very much anyway. But
it was a bit Darren Aronofsky, that kind of style. And also when we see the titles come up at the end, that was very kind of, it's almost like the director, you know, has obviously been inspired by those kind of films, trying to make it quite arty.
David Lynch as well, definitely. The thing that lets it down is I don't know if there's quite enough substance in the plot and the way the characters are built up before it kind of goes a bit nuts.
I was thinking that as well. Also, the first half, Josh Ruben, he's quite a handsome guy, and I don't know whether he was too handsome to be really scary, because he didn't really terrify me that much.
He's really cute, he's really hot, and I guess that's the whole thing, isn't it? That's what makes it more, he has more success doing what he's doing, and it makes it more disturbing.
And he does prove that he can act in the second half, because obviously the second half he's kind of tormented, so more tormented than the first part. And it does question the whole, why do people commit these crimes as well, and it kind of plays around with that, and also the revenge element as well. I thought there was some good, well executed jump scares. There was a few jump scares where I mean, there's one with a dog near the beginning which really made me jump. But there's quite a few others and some creepy figures. I don't think the puppet, not the puppetry, but the kind of, you know, the figures that we see, the mystical figures, the Greek mythology stuff, I don't think that was done that well. I'm just wondering if it's because they didn't have the budget, because it's obviously a lower budget movie.
I think it's also that thing where there was like, and again, I'm sure it's entirely intentional, there was a bit of a clash of, like, you know, one of the tormentors seemed to be very much a kind of like figure of nature, kind of almost having grown sort of twigs and whatever. Then the other was someone clearly wearing a sort of almost Greek dramatic mask. There was another character involved that wasn't one of the tormentors, but it was then kind of revealed to be like a blob made of jelly with eyes, which makes me think that the intent is more to kind of represent this sort of like chaos of someone experiencing this, and so they're almost like different art forms of what that tormentor could be. But yeah, it meant that it didn't look that consistent.
I was going to mention to you the makeup and effects as well, because I didn't think they were that authentic, especially the blood. I thought the blood did look like red paint, but maybe that was the point, to make it look like a kind of Dario Argento movie.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I think that very bright blood and those colours, I think that probably that's probably intentional.
Some of the bruising as well on one of the characters' face, you could see it was almost like charcoal was just rubbed under his eyes. It didn't really look like bruises, it just looked like makeup to me. Drew me out of it a little bit though, because I loved the atmosphere at the start. I really liked the way that it was shot as well. There's one scene where you see her in the window looking down. It's almost like she's starting to realise that this place is really, really creepy. And
the very first scene is an auction, an art auction, and it looks like a 70s film, like, and it also has this effect of, it has all these like close-ups on people's jewellery and kind of like something. It's quite sort of disorienting and a bit odd. So I think there's a lot of really clever stuff in there. I wonder if it runs with the plot a little bit too quickly.
And also I thought it was more scary at the beginning. It was ramped up in the second half, and it did go nuts, but I didn't get as scared by that so much. So ultimately then, final score, I kind of enjoyed it. I wanted there to be more of the feel of the first half. Like I say, Act 1 I really enjoyed, Act 2 not so much. But yeah, I liked the ideas. I thought it was relatively well executed, but I just felt a little underwhelmed at the end, unfortunately. So I'm going to give it 55% for me, so it's just over midway mark.
I'm going to be a bit kinder, and I'm going to go 65, because I kind of think it's something that's trying to be ambitious and doesn't quite get there, rather than something that's just a bit rubbish. It does have a lot to offer.
So it does qualify then. It's a boys on film banger. Just. Oh, it was very...
Well, I say 64 then. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a blunder, but banger is like...
It's undecided. So it's a Shudder original. It's premiering on Thursday, 1st of December. So if you have Shudder, you can watch it on Shudder. If you don't subscribe, by the way, to Shudder, I'd recommend it because we've done quite a few films in the past. There's some really good stuff on there. Lots
really
of series as well.
Yeah. And then like a whole back catalogue and stuff on there as well. So
yeah. All the classics.
Treat yourself as the antidote to the Hallmark Christmas films that are all on the way.
Yeah, but I love a good Hallmark movie at Christmas. There's a really good Mariah Carey one, which is just the best because it's brilliant for all the wrong reasons.
I can imagine.
Thank you, Paul, as always, and thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.